I'm excited. Let's roll.
Awesome. Let's do it.
Um, if you're just joining us and you haven't yet, feel free to drop your name, pronouns, where you live, and how you like to spend time in nature in the chat. Um, all right, cool. We'll start with introductions. Um, I'm Margo. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a graphic designer and my studio is called High Mountain Creative. I'm based in Missoula, Montana on traditional lands of the Salish and Kootenai people. I collaborate with nonprofits and mission-driven brands to develop visual storytelling pieces that raise awareness, increase impact, and make environmental causes more accessible to everyone. I create things like infographics, annual reports, logos and branding, illustrations, and campaigns, and have worked with organizations like NOAA, Trout Unlimited, the Nature Conservancy, and the National Forest Foundation. And my favorite thing to do in nature is picnics.
I love that. Love a good picnic. Thanks, Margot. Hi, everyone. I'm Ali. I use she, her pronouns. As you can probably tell from the accent, I'm originally from Melbourne, Australia, but these days I'm based in Canada, and I'm currently living on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Mississaugas of the Credit, and many, many other groups and peoples who have cared for this land for millennia. I'm the owner of Uncommon Ground Communications. I was previously the executive director of Protect Our Winters Canada. And these days I help clients like SkiCan, the Forest Stewardship Council, and Plus Outdoor to build momentum behind their environmental and social sustainability goals using strategic evidence-based communication strategies and engaging content.
Uh, so we already kind of introduced Angie, but if any of you are having any difficulties or anything, feel free to message Angie and she'll be kind of helping us out today. So creatives like Ali and I often work with marketing and communications teams to create stories as part of a larger strategy for things like campaigns, newsletters, and fundraising. Our complementary skills can help create powerful stories that secure donors, gain supporters, and mindfully market products or services. So that is why we've decided to come together today and join our creative forces to share some sustainable storytelling tips with you. That's a tongue twister. I'm going to try not to say it that way again. All right. For the run of show, we're going to talk about why storytelling for sustainability is different, why stories work, the elements of an effective story, how to get a story to stick. And Ali and I are both going to share some case studies from some campaigns that we've worked on, and also share a worksheet that we'll be sending out after that you can use to get started with your own storytelling campaigns. And then hopefully we'll have some time at the end for some Q&A. So let's dive in.
Awesome. Thanks, Margot. I wanted to touch quickly on why it was that Margot and I decided to run this particular workshop and why now. And in our conversations, I think we both felt that we're at a really crucial point in our history for when it comes to sustainability and conservation. There's so many organizations and people out there doing really good, really powerful things. But I think we've all noticed that there's more polarization, there's more division, and people are just feeling super distracted and drained. So we felt that, now more than ever, it's really important that we focus on evidence-based approaches to communication. And we wanted to address this question of when people are overwhelmed and exhausted, how can you motivate them to take action? And really, I think the best way to do that is through stories. So our goal today is to try and equip you with the ability to tell stories that can really move the dial, whether that's getting people to make a donation, to shop more mindfully, to buy a more sustainable product, or to take some sort of action for the climate. We want to make sure that you have the ability to use storytelling to achieve those goals. And hopefully something new to you. A lot of folks who work in communication tend to be trained in either the visual side or more the, sort of written content side. So hopefully by combining the two, we can share some skills that feel new and allow you to plan a really holistic, powerful campaign.
So quality storytelling requires teamwork, like Ali mentioned. us creatives, we like to work together, and it's really helpful to work with people who have different skill sets. So, for example, as a designer, I'll typically work with someone like Allie, a writer, and they'll curate the story and hand it over to me to then create some visuals and, translate it into something like an infographic or a campaign that will help strengthen the story. So, let's dive into why stories work.
Yeah. Stories are powerful. Human beings for thousands of years have been sitting around campfires, telling stories, not just for entertainment, but using them as a way to teach, to convey important lessons, to establish cultural norms. One that I always refer to is an Australian First Nations story about this mythical creature called the bunyip. And parents would talk about the bunyip to frighten their children away from bodies of water where the bunyip supposedly lived. And the reason for that makes a ton of sense. It's because you don't want kids wandering around creeks, dams, oceans before they've learned to swim. So that was a story that was passed down through generations and that pretty much every Australian child knows. Um, and a really effective example of how stories can stay in our minds. In Western cultures, I think we all know the Aesop's fable story of the hare and the tortoise, which is kind of a cautionary tale reminding us all that we need to stay humble. And
And visual,
images, oh, sorry,
oh,
Margo, go for it.
from all throughout history, from hieroglyphics on rock walls to museums and art galleries, images have been used to tell stories throughout history. They're especially important before literacy was widespread, and images are memorable because they can be processed by the brain 60,000 times faster than text, and they elicit a quicker emotional response. So the emotion is what triggers our brain to want to remember.
Yeah, 100%. When we associate an emotion with a memory, it's our brain teaching us to either run towards something or run away from it. So I think that's why both stories and visuals work so well in tandem.
And visuals can help invite the reader in. Storytelling with visuals is the powerful one-two punch for communicators and marketers. In our digital world, images can entice someone to click on a story or not click on a story. And studies show that people perceive stories that have relevant images attached to it to be more truthful. And historically, sustainability, conservation, and climate science, we've relied on a facts only approach. It's always been very data driven and maybe not super human friendly. So it worked for a while, but it's failing to kind of get the general public on board because the information feels complicated and remote from their everyday lives. So data might create the knowledge, but engaging the heart with stories is where the change really happens, especially with issues like climate change and sustainability and all the other things going on right now. So one challenge, this is another reason why storytelling for sustainability can really feel different. One challenge with storytelling with sustainability is that sustainability can mean different things to different people. To a rancher, sustainability might mean how they graze their cattle, while for a ski company, sustainability might mean how and where their goods are made. And to a lot of people, the concept of sustainability is new or unknown or just plain confusing. Also, our industry tends to have its own language. There are words, phrases, and acronyms that may be very familiar to us as marketers, but foreign to our everyday audience. Things like SDGs, draw down, zero waste. And as storytellers, we need to effectively tap into this and make our stories relatable. The key to this is knowing your audience and to meet them where they're at. What do they know about now? What do they care about? What is their knowledge of sustainability? If your audience doesn't know that SDGs stands for Sustainable Development Goals, think of it as an opportunity to educate them and get them more interested.
Absolutely, Margot. I think for those of us who live and breathe sustainability, it can feel so obvious that making good choices for the planet is making good choices for us. But for people just going about their everyday lives, that's not always the case. sustainability can feel really complicated, it can feel a little bit wonky, and definitely overwhelming. It's something that I think is so important as communicators and marketers to remember is that from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed at night, we make over 32,000 decisions every single day. It's an absolute drain on our brains where we end up just kind of completely overwhelmed and exhausted. And when it comes to sustainability, that's something that, we've probably all experienced. How many times have you stood in the grocery store and you're looking at the spinach and one of them's organic and one of them's locally grown and one of them doesn't come in plastic? How on earth are you supposed to make the right choice? It's really overwhelming. And when human brains are overwhelmed, they tend to go for the easiest and most familiar option. So it's really our job as communicators to try and help people to navigate that complexity and to break down the barriers to making the best decisions.
I love the grocery aisle. I'm the same way. I can sit there all day and and analyze okay, this honey or these berries or something, the packaging and where it was made and what the ingredients are. It can really be analysis paralysis. So that's where storytelling can come in, even just on a package.
One giant exercise in overthinking. So I want to dive in a little bit to what are the elements of an effective story. I think the word storytelling gets thrown around a lot at the moment. It's a bit of a trend or a buzzword, but few organizations, I think, really do it very well. So we want to support you to really tell that story in a way that feels engaging and exciting for people. And the good news is there's a really straightforward way to do that. It is, and I see if I can click through, there it is, the narrative arc. So what I'm going to do is actually ask all of you to throw something into the chat. Tell us what is your favorite book or your favorite story. And then I'm going to dive into this a little more. Harry Potter, classic, cannot go wrong. The Alchemist, yes, great choice. Oh, the Lorax, I love that. Project Hail Mary, A Psalm for Love. I'm going to have to record this chat. There's a few here I don't know. Add them to my TBR list. The Last Unicorn. Margo, what's yours?
The Secret Life of Walter Mitty.
Yes, classic.
The new
I
one.
love that.
I think there's like the original one, but I like the Ben Stiller version. It just like makes me want to travel and like just climb a mountain.
It's such an uplifting story. I love it. And yeah, Tim, ditto to Wild Robot. I took my kids to see that, and I may have been the one in the theatre that was like wiping a tear away. So, what I would love for all of you to do while you're thinking about your favorite story, film, book, whatever it might be, is just to keep that in mind as we walk through the narrative arc a little bit. Because whether it's Superman, Jane Austen, Star Wars, Cinderella, pretty much every story that we all know tends to follow this pattern of the narrative arc. The story might feel really different, but the structure is essentially the same. So every story starts with an exposition. That's where we're kind of setting the scene, we meet the main character, we get a little bit of a flavor of what this story is going to be about. And then, generally, pretty early on, there's some sort of inciting incident. Something happens to kick off the action and set the hero of the story off on their journey. We then start to experience rising action, the tension in the story builds a little bit, and we start to wonder, oh, is everything going to be okay? We're invested in this hero now. How's it going to work out for them? Until the point where they reach some sort of a crisis. Another name for this, people sometimes call it the dark night. We start to think that perhaps all is lost. We're at the kind of peak of tension in the story. Finally, we reach the climax, and you can see here the little stick figure guy has slain the dragon. This is kind of the most exciting and crucial point in the story. It's where kind of the big stuff really happens. From there, we roll into the denouement, fancy French word. It's basically just where all the threads of the story come together. Things start to be revealed, and the tension declines. We kind of start to feel like hopefully everything's going to be okay. And that leads us to the end. Most stories, not all, most everything gets tied up in a neat little bow, and our hero moves off victorious, ready for the next adventure. So, what I thought would be fun would be to go through a bit of an example. And I wanted to pick a story that we all know. And given the times that we're currently living in, I wanted to pick a story that's a little bit light and a little bit stupid. So I chose Die Hard. And I wanted to run through that really quickly using the narrative arc. And you can see if you think I'm right about the pattern that it follows. And then we can have an argument at the end about whether it's a Christmas story or not. So, super quickly, exposition. Our hero of the story, John McClane, is sitting on an aeroplane. He's on his way to go and visit his wife, Holly, in LA. We know she's got this big executive job, that he's maybe not so happy about that. We get the sense that there's a little bit of tension between them and that something is going to evolve once he lands on the ground. So John hops off the plane in LA, gets pretty quickly taken by a fun kid in a limo to Nakatomi Plaza, where his wife works. And the inciting incident follows on pretty quickly from that. We see a black Mercedes pull up, and immediately we're cued that this is something pretty interesting because we know that only bad guys drive black Mercedes. So we see the bad guys jump out, they bust through the front doors, they shoot the security guard, and the action kicks off. This is our inciting incident. Rising action, I think this is probably most of the film. Explosions, gunshots, the chief bad guy, Hans Gruber, comes in and takes all of the staff at the Christmas party hostage. It's all building up to this kind of big crisis point. We know John McClane is on his own. He's not going to get any help from the outside. How is he going to solve this kind of world-ending problem that he's facing? Our crisis point happens when the poor old CEO of the Nakatomi Corporation gets it in the head, and Hans Gruber looks like he's going to escape by helicopter with all of the bearing bonds from the safe. But luckily, our hero emerges to save the day. John McClane pushes him to a well-deserved death. He plummets 34 floors into the plaza below, and all of the hostages are saved. That's our climax. Denouement. John and Holly walk out of the plaza hand in hand. We know that everything is rosy with their marriage. They're going to live happily ever after. They shake the hand of the cop who was helping John out from the ground along the way, and the story gets tied up in a neat little bow. So, Die Hard in a nutshell follows the narrative arc. Margo, is it a Christmas story?
To me, anything that happens during Christmas is a Christmas story. So yes.
Love it. Love it. If you can watch it on Christmas Eve, it's a Christmas story. So before I hand over to Margo to talk about the visuals, I just want to talk a little bit about finding the hero of your story, because this is where you're really going to be able to draw people in. People love stories about other people. So finding someone who is really relatable and someone that your audience is going to be invested in is key to having a really powerful and effective story. And it's not always, in fact, it's rarely the John McClane type of person. More often, especially in our sorts of fields, it might be someone like scientists unearthing really important information, or young community leaders, journalists taking risks to surface an important story, or often parents make fantastic heroes of the story because they're acting selflessly and out of love for the next generation. So the key to a good hero, they're relatable, we want them to be a little bit fallible. We want them to feel like us. There's this trope in literature called the Mary Ann character, which is someone who's so incredibly perfect that they're boring. And we don't want that. We want them to have a few kind of relatable flaws. The David and Goliath aspect is also fantastic. People love to root for the little guy. So finding someone who's, fighting a battle that's bigger than them is super inspirational. And someone with the ability to inspire others, they bring people in, they create a community around them to solve a problem together. I think those are the characteristics of a hero in a great sustainability or conservation story.
Well, I don't know if I can top Die Hard, but I'm gonna dive into kind of more the visual side of your storytelling. So visuals are really a powerful way to support your story and usually part of a bigger campaign strategy. It can include things like photography, video, infographics, maps, illustrations, animations, even something as simple as a set of icons, and as complex as your branding and visual ID, which I'll go over next here. Good visuals can solve problems and answer questions and help tell a story at a glance. They can make a topic more accessible. When done well, visuals can simplify complex messages, make them more relatable and easier to digest. We do this by visualizing data or sharing a map or including some sort of illustrated elements or a piece of art even. Visuals can help broaden your audience if you think about it. To a variety of different age groups and learning types. For example, Gen Z and millennials are more likely to engage with short form content and things like infographics and reels or TikTok videos, where boomers might be more likely to read or digest longer form content. Additionally, if you think about visual learners, someone like myself, we're more likely to remember something graphic based with an image over something that just has written content alone. And according to a study published by HubSpot, original graphics like infographics and illustrations tend to perform better than stock photos, which is sort of a testament to tailored and authentic visuals. They can be a really important part of your story versus just going on. There's a time and place for stock imagery, but if you have the capabilities to do something that's tailored to your story, it will definitely be more effective. Go to the next slide. So kind of going back to your visual ID. Oh, actually, can you go, is there another slide, Allie, that has I ended up changing them at the last minute. There's like the ones that says colors, fonts, and graphic styles. Yes, thank you. Okay. I decided to do this one first because it kind of explains the next slide better. So the most important element or one of the most important elements of your story is your look and feel. This is kind of the essence of your brand, and your brand carries down and trickles down to all of your storytelling elements. So things like your logo, the colors, are they bright and uplifting or natural and organic and more muted? Your fonts, are they serif or sans serif? Are they blocky, thin, modern, or traditional, handwritten? And what does that say about your brand and about your story? The graphic style that's been established, how thick the lines are the graphics simple or complex, hand drawn and illustrated, or flat and three-dimensional? This all can really tell a story without even using words. And then if you're on the, photo and video treatments used, depending on, it can be filters or the lower thirds or whatever is being used on your photos and videos, that can tell a story. So if your brand is more serious, the look and feel needs to reflect that. No Comic Sans. And if it's playful and fun, go wild. That should be reflected in your colors and fonts and graphic styles. All these aspects of your brand evoke certain feelings in your audience and create an emotional connection. So it's important to make sure that the look and feel of your brand and all of your storytelling elements is intentional and honors the feelings and connections you want to make with your audience. This is the visual ID that will be the cover of your storybook.
I love that, Margo.
Sorry, now we're going to
There you
have to
go.
go back up to the storybook slide.
I've lost my mouse over here. Let me see if the keyboard's going to do it.
Thank
There we
you.
go.
Sorry, that was a last minute decision. So
All good.
now we've talked a little bit about your brand's visual ID, and I like to think of this as kind of the cover of your storybook, and that everything inside of this book is kind of what Ali just talked about with the narrative arc framework and your hero and the climax, and then it also includes kind of all of the graphics and videos and photos, etc., that you're going to use for your storytelling. So if the cover of your storybook doesn't match what's inside, it's going to be really confusing for your audience. And a visual identity that reflects the sustainability of your brand or organization tells a story in itself. And if you're lucky and you've had the opportunity to work with a designer or an agency, you might have a really awesome comprehensive brand style guide that has visual ID and brand voice items and things inside of it. And if you don't, if you're maybe a smaller organization or you're just getting started or you didn't even know about the style guide, it's something that is worth even making an in-house effort to do, getting together with your team and kind of narrowing down what all you want to have as part of your visual elements, and even maybe a list of voice words and your color palette and the fonts, even if it's just something that you create in-house using Canva or Microsoft Word or something, just like an outline so that whatever visual ID and graphic style and fonts are being used on social media, they're also being used on your website and also being used on any other branded materials, business cards, and things like that. And lastly, if your visual ID and branding isn't supporting your sustainability story, maybe it was created before you started your sustainability journey, or it just doesn't feel like it's jiving, it might be time to consider a brand refresh. And next, I'm going to go into, I'm just going to touch on this really briefly because there are a lot of resources for this, but being mindful of individuals in your audience with disabilities is important for reducing barriers so that everyone can enjoy your story. Two tools that I use pretty regularly are Adobe Color Contrast Checker. This helps you check the visual accessibility of your text and graphics using a pass-fail system. So you'll just take the two color values, the hex codes that you're using, and plug them into this website, and it will tell you if it will be visible or easy to read from someone with low vision. And then the next one is the Be My Eyes alt text generator. It's an app that creates alt text for images and graphics by scanning the image with your phone. And alt text helps people using screen readers by describing photos and visuals that are included in your content. And if you have more questions about some of this stuff, I do have more resources, but those are just kind of like my two favorite things. So thought I'd share them.
Thanks, Margo. Super important. And I can testify to that. I hadn't used these apps, I didn't know about them, but luckily, when I was building my website, I had completely by accident chosen fairly accessible text and colors. And I actually had a potential client contact me who was visually impaired. And the reason that we had an initial kickoff conversation was because she'd found my website to be accessible. So, yeah, absolutely makes a difference. So I wanted to talk a little bit about really sticking the landing when it comes to telling a sustainability climate conservation story. We mentioned earlier that storytelling for sustainability is a little bit different. And while it will hopefully follow that narrative arc that we spoke about, like most stories do, there are some considerations to think about when you're crafting a story specifically in this field. So I want to talk a little bit about how to do that. Reason being, or the goal that we all should have as storytellers, no matter what the objective is to break down the barriers to people understanding conservation, climate, sustainability messages, and to invite them into the story. As we'd already said, I think we've got enough polarization. We want to bring people together, not push them further apart. So, how can we do that? It's really down to the language that we choose. So, reframing is really important. we have a tendency to fall into kind of verbal habits. We talk about the planet, the environment, but just by simply using that word the, it makes the thing a lot more remote. So when we can start to use words like we, our, us, all those really nice kind of first person plural words, it acts like an invitation to invite people to consider that this problem belongs to them as well. Another big one I really want to touch on is inclusive words. Typically, people who work in fields like ours tend to have a higher level of education than the general population. And it's natural for us to, as Margo mentioned earlier, use the jargon of our industry, talking about 1.5 degrees, the Paris Agreement, biodiversity. And while that feels really common and normal for us, that language and those wordings don't necessarily land with a general audience, depending on who you're speaking to. They can feel kind of academic and boring at best. They can feel confusing, especially for tired and overwhelmed brains. And in worst case scenarios, they can really feel like a closed door, like there's this sort of elite club that they're not being invited into. So choosing really straightforward and simple words isn't being patronizing. It's making sure that all of those doors are open for everybody to walk through and to be part of creating solutions together. One I wanted to touch on as well is love language. What does that mean? There's a group called the Potential Energy Coalition who do some absolutely brilliant research about what sorts of messaging stick, particularly when it comes to climate change. I definitely recommend you check out their website if you work in this field. It's really interesting, really accessible research. We've got the link. I think Angie was going to pop it in the chat, but I can also share it afterwards. So they recently did a study that looked at, as I was saying, what messages stick. And they surveyed about, I think it was the number was like 96,000 people globally. Huge, huge study. And the thing that they found was that when we frame climate and sustainability messaging in terms of love, those messages are 12 times more effective. And they cross all barriers. They cross language barriers, cultural barriers, socioeconomic barriers, because it's something that we can all identify with, particularly when we're talking about love for the next generation. Whether you're a parent or not, everyone has a nephew or a niece, or they see the cute kindergartners walking down the street. It's a natural instinct that all human beings have to want to try and create a world that is safe and clean and healthy for the next generation. So framing your message around love is really fantastic. The final piece is solutions. We talked earlier about how the environmental movement has really traditionally focused on what I would call crisis-centric messaging, just kind of presenting these huge, overwhelming problems to people in the hope that it might scare us all into action. That worked a little bit early in the day, but I think we're all at a point now where it's just a bit too much. And when we start presenting problems without a solution, people become overwhelmed very quickly. They start to feel like that there's nothing that they, as Ali in Toronto, Margo in Missoula, can do to solve this problem. Whereas when we show that the solutions exist, whether that's a solar panel on a roof or a community garden, whatever those answers might be, it shows people that there is a path forward. It's a little bit like lighting the way for them. So this little dose of hope is really critical. And I think that, we've leaned on the science of climate for a really long time. We believe it. It's something that, I think we like to say as a movement, we believe in climate science. The reason I wanted to go over this is because we need to believe in communication science as well. These strategies are proven, and the more we use them, the more we'll bring people into the conversation. For my visual learners, I wanted to present this information in a slightly different way. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I just wanted to share what I call kind of the circles of importance to people. And this can really help with our message framing. We're all human. we all tend to put ourselves at the center of our own worlds. So when we talk about climate and sustainability messaging, framing it around the things that matter most to the individual are going to be the most effective messages. So that tends to be my health, my wealth, my world, things that affect my personal well-being, that might affect my finances, and might affect the things that I care most immediately about. Next circle out is people's immediate family. Obviously, they're the ones that we want to protect most and create a good world for. And it tends to go out from there. Some organizations, like I think Protect Our Winters, does a really fantastic job of connecting the feeling of love for places and experiences that are meaningful and wanting to protect those things. So that's something also that you can tap into. But typically, the further out you go from someone's own small world, the harder it is to get them to care about an issue. So let's talk a little bit about how we can bring all of these ideas together in some case studies. Margo, I'll hand over to you first.
Thank you. Today I'm going to talk about this campaign that I worked on with Native Fish Society. Native Fish Society works to revive native fish. That's another tongue twister. Revive native fish species, reconnect and restore watersheds, and support sustainable fisheries in the Pacific Northwest. I've been working with Native Fish Society for almost 10 years. They're one of my longest standing clients, and it's really been fun to watch them grow and change. And this year they're celebrating their 30th anniversary, which is huge. So to celebrate, one thing that we're working on together is sharing stories of some of the successful campaigns that they've and by campaigns, I mean like conservation projects that they've worked on over the years. So to help amplify these stories, I worked with Native Fish Society to develop an icon set with a custom graphic to represent each campaign that they have successfully worked on with a conservation project. So these stories are being told everywhere on social media, through their email and their newsletters, on their website. In the upper right corner is their annual appeal, where we kind of introduced the new campaigns from last year. And oh, the icons were turned into stickers, and these were handed out, at their events and at their fundraising banquet. It's just been used everywhere. When we started working on this, I didn't realize like how big of a reach it would have, and so it's been really great to see the story unfold and to see how it's all kind of being translated. So you might be thinking, oh, it's just a little graphic. Like, how can that, really tell a story? Like, why is it a big deal? But Native Fish Society's audience is really deeply involved and committed in their cause. These people, they're volunteers, they're river stewards. They have a fellowship program where people are donating their time with all of their different skill sets to help these rivers and help these fish in these wild places. And so these aren't just like your everyday donors. These people are they're hardcore, they're super involved. A lot of them are just like really smart and passionate about fish and about the places that they live in their backyard. So giving them this kind of extra piece of the story to help them relate and connect to this cause, whether it's something that they worked on personally, or the river that's in their backyard or in their community, or a fish that they remembered, going fishing for with their granddad when they were growing up, and now it's threatened and they helped, revive it. So there's like a lot of different aspects of this that really helps bring the story full circle. And it created some extra connection and validation for the many people who helped bring these conservation projects to life. So Yes, I loved I loved working on this, and it's been really cool to watch this organization grow over the years and turn 30 this year. So now I'm going to turn it over to Allie, and we're going to hear about her project with Protect Our Winters that helped bring a high-speed rail to Canada. And just a disclaimer, there is some entertaining yet explicit language in the next portion of the presentation.
Thanks, Margo. Yeah, we didn't think we'd have to put a language warning on the cover of this, but there you go. So I wanted to talk about a campaign we did when I was the ED at Power called the Fuck It, I'll Take the Bus campaign. And it was a little edgy, I guess, but we chose that language very deliberately because we knew our audience so well at POW. We knew that they're young, we knew that they're edgy, we knew that they're a little bit jaded with traditional conservation campaigns. So it was a very deliberate choice. My mum hated it. A few of the parents of folks in the group were not fans, but this was really us kind of one campaign shouldn't be for all people. And this was us very much speaking to the audience that we knew that we wanted to reach. So, what was the challenge? What we recognized was that rural and outdoor areas in Canada are really poorly served by transit. Essentially, there's none. It really limited access for people who didn't own a car and dramatically increased car reliance for those who did. We started out doing a huge amount of research. We're very fortunate to have a PhD researcher on staff who was able to look into this for us. And some of the numbers that we came up with were pretty mind blowing. So, one example I can give you is we found that Whistler has 24,000 visitors a day. That's year round too, not just in winter, by the way. And with an average group size of about 1.9 people, that amounts to 12,500 cars on the Sea to Sky Highway every day. That takes 100 acres of parking, which is the same as 54 football fields, all land that needs to be cleared with the forests that would traditionally grow on that land. And those cars were pumping out 700 metric tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every day. So that's the same amount of carbon pollution as 88 houses would put out in an entire year. So it's a big problem and something that we felt that POWER was pretty well placed to address as an organisation that advocates for outdoor spaces. We knew, though, that as much as those numbers were pretty amazing, that they weren't necessarily going to move the dial for everybody. And it was really important to us to have an integrated, holistic campaign that involved a lot of storytelling. So the way that we did that was to pull a little stunt, and we filmed me going from my home in Toronto to the halls of Parliament in Ottawa to go and lobby MPs to think about how we can get more transit into rural and outdoor recreation areas in Canada. This is what the journey looked like. I walked 20 minutes from my house to the regional train station. I took a train that got me as far as Ottawa. Then I had to take a bus, which took me north to Peterborough. And then actually, I think I took another bus inside Peterborough to the outskirts of Peterborough. And then I got stuck. There was literally no way for me to get from Peterborough to Ottawa. So we had one of our athletes swoop in. He was the hero of the day, came in his electric car and drove me to the Ottawa Senator Stadium on the outside of the city. And from there, I caught another 2 trains to the downtown area. So pulling this stunt and treating it as a story, this kind of drama of me trying to get somewhere, getting very stuck, the exhaustion of that, it took 12 hours to go 400 kilometers or about 250 miles, enabled us to get a lot of media attention. We ended up getting a lot of press, radio, PR. And after we met with the MPs in Ottawa, one of them actually ended up mimicking our stunt and trying to go from Ottawa to his hometown in a very remote area of BC, Bella Coola region. And that took him 6 days. So imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. We felt like maybe this campaign had worked pretty well. And the result was we're getting a train just in the last month. Yay! Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced that Canada would install a long planned but long delayed high speed rail that runs from Toronto to Quebec City in the province of Quebec. Funnily enough, stopping in Peterborough, the area that I got stranded, but also passing through a lot of really great outdoor recreation hubs, places that are really important to people who like the outdoors for hiking, paddling, fishing, backcountry skiing, the works. So we're super excited to see that come to fruition. I don't think we can honestly claim that power is the sole result or the sole reason that this happened. It's always a huge team effort. We have heard from the people that we spoke with that our campaign was spoken about a lot by the politicians who are trying to push some of these transit issues forward. So we felt like we made a contribution, and we think that storytelling was a huge part of that. Margo.
So, we're nearing the end of our presentation, and we're excited to share a free resource for you. We'll drop it in the chat and also send it out with the recording afterwards that will help you get started with telling your own sustainability story. I'm not going to go through everything right now, but if you have any questions as you're going through this, feel free to email Allie or I about it. It's just to kind of help you get, there's some prompts and questions and things to help you get the juices flowing, to help you develop the written and visual pieces of your own storytelling campaign. It's interactive, or you can print it out. Hopefully that's exciting for you. And I think we can open it up to Q&A. Do you have anything else, Allie?
No, sounds great. Angie, I don't know if you've noticed any questions in the chat come through. Otherwise,
No,
we
we
can
haven't
open the
asked for
floor.
any. Would you be open to people dropping questions in the chat or doing the raise hand function? Doing it live?
Absolutely.
All
Either
right,
is great.
y'all type your questions. I see Jewel has a question. Jewel Thompson. Oh,
Sorry, I was
sorry,
muted.
I unmuted you.
Okay, thank you. I had a question about your campaign with Protect Our Winters, Angie, or Allie, not Angie. How long from your campaign to the decision to put in a high-speed rail line? Like, how long was that time?
It was, let me do the math, a little over a year, about 15 months.
Okay, cool. Good to know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, these things don't happen overnight.
Good things take time.
Yeah, exactly.
We have a question from Jenna in the chat that says, any advice on keeping storytelling short when the background is complex and the solution is not intuitive? Why don't we start with Allie and then see if Margo wants to add anything?
That is a great question and really hard to do, and I think really important to do in an age where attention spans are shrinking. I would suggest really focusing on the rising action crisis points of that narrative arc. Don't spend so much time on the exposition. And I think if you don't have a clear solution, maybe you end your story by inviting your audience to be part of that solution, offering them to chip in with their ideas or to join your campaign or cause. That could be a really great call to action to have. But focusing on the drama and the hero, I think, would be the key elements I would focus on and try to do.
And on the visual side, I'm kind of a broken record, but I would say an infographic. When you get the worksheet, you'll see that there's a section that kind of asks you to, if you could sum up your story in like 5 bullet points, what would it be? And I think that's a really helpful way to kind of figure out what the most important pieces of your story are. And from there, if you do choose to use an infographic or something like that, you can kind of take those bullet points and figure out effective ways to visualize them and make those pieces like really easy to digest and kind of understand the complex story in bite-sized pieces.
Great tip, Margo.
Okay, Kyle in the chat says, how do you focus on both we language and the me circle of importance?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's really going to depend on the structure and style of your story. So you might talk about, I'm trying to think of a good example because that's often the best way to do it. If you're talking about, say, a local conservation issue, you know, you might talk about our river or our community, but for the user, you're picking elements out of that story that are going to relate most to them. So you might talk about how having this healthy river is going to contribute to community health and well-being, or it's going to make housing prices in the area go up because you're removing pollution and creating a pleasant atmosphere for people to be in, creating better amenities. So it might be kind of our community, but you're picking elements that are kind of to highlight that are going to be critical to that person that help them make that translation. I hope that makes sense, Kyle.
Thank you. We have, what would you both say has been your biggest shift or lesson learned in being more effective storytellers through your storytelling journeys? Margo, can you start?
Yeah, I I have to probably fall on like the fail forward of this. Like just like if I look at an infographic that I made like 10 years ago, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like so there's like way too much information and like there's too many graphics and it's like too messy. So I think I mean I know that like trial and error isn't always like the best answer, but I feel like with me with like visual storytelling, it really has taken just like dialing in my process and um kind of getting to know what works. And the thing is that like also like things are always changing, so like keeping up with what's trending or what people are engaging with is important. But that's kind of like the long the long way around answer of saying just figuring out what your own process is um and sailing forward. Allie, do you have a better answer?
I love that. I have a different answer, not a better one. Um, I think for me, it's overcoming my own natural tendencies. I'm a huge nerd. I love facts and I love sharing facts with people. It gives me a buzz. And so trying to learn to do that in a way that is also much more narrative based, so that I'm not just kind of standing there like a very boring science lecture in my communications has been really critical. And I think also to the point of the earlier question, you know, I really love to write. I love words, but I know that attention spans are getting shorter. People just don't have as much time in their day. So trying to compress those narratives and make them more digestible has been a learning journey for me as well. Falling back on that, you know, what does the science say? Science of communication.
This is it's a little tangential but related to that. Somebody in the chat asked how generally how and where can you start in this industry? It sounds like they're going through a career change from being a science and English teacher. So they're wondering about getting into like marketing, advertising, or helping people that need storytelling services. So maybe you could each give like a quick rundown of how you got into doing this work. Maybe at Margo start.
Yeah, for me, it was, I kind of had a pivot. Maybe I've always been a graphic designer, but I sort of pivoted from working in the kind of the ski and outdoor industry and kind of had this revelation of I wanted to, like, that wasn't enough for me. I wanted to do more for the environment and I felt a lot of eco anxiety. So from there, I kind of just started taking on smaller projects with clients that were in the nonprofit world and the conservation world. If you're since you're kind of interested in making a full pivot, how can you volunteer with local organizations and offer what skills you have? How can you get involved? Can you join a board? Can you attend meetings? Like what can you do to kind of like get your foot in the door at these places and see how your skills can translate into some of this new like, yeah, like advertising, storytelling, or the conservation world. So to me, that would be a great place to start.
Yeah, fully agree with that, Margo. I started as a lawyer, so I am fully in favor of giant career pivots. Do it. It's rewarding. It's you have to follow your heart with these things sometimes. One piece of advice, in addition to Margo's suggestion of volunteering, which I fully echo, is thinking about how you can make the move diagonally, like a chess move. You don't necessarily have to make the giant leap first. You can step into an adjacent field and then an adjacent one to that to get to where you want to be. So I moved from law into consulting. That brought me really close to change management, which has a huge communications components. And that enabled me to take on more comms responsibilities. And I built those skills over time before moving fully into communications.
That's awesome. There's also a note in the chat from Haley that AmeriCorps can also be a great way to get your foot in the door in a new industry. It looks like we have just one question left, unless anyone drops anything in really quickly. It says, can you offer advice on working with scientists / who want to make sure that all communications are exactly accurate when their edits often introduce overly complicated exposition, jargon, etc.? Allie, you want to start?
I have done so much of this, and I feel the pain of the person in the chat asking this question. I love scientists. They're so precise, but their skills don't always align with what we need as communicators. The thing that I found most effective in my career is to show them what the science of communication says. Scientists don't like theories or things that they feel like you've plucked out of the air. But if you can show them the research and studies that say this is the type of communication that works, how can we make sure we can adapt your message to this so that it resonates with people? They tend to get on board with that pretty quickly. So I hope that helps. And again, Potential Energy Coalition and Yale Center for Climate Change Communication are both fantastic resources for that.
On the visual side, I deal with this a lot too, because everyone wants to communicate everything in a visual or put every little thing on a map or in an infographic. And I sort of have to remind them that like I kind of picture myself as sort of this translator where the scientists are kind of telling me all of the things that they want to communicate, and I have to sort of like translate it like a robot into something that the general population can can digest. And so I sort of remind them, like, this is what I do for a living, and if I don't understand what you're saying, or like I often have to ask a lot of questions and get clarifications from kind of like from the scientists or from the people that are researchers or doing that type of work, so that I can understand it, because I need to be able to understand it in order to simplify it into something that I would have understood before I asked them all these questions. So just reminding these scientists that you're working with that that we're the professionals, and we're there to help, and just let us kind of help them translate like their important message into something that more people will understand. So yeah, thank you everybody. Those are all really great questions, and we could probably talk all day, I'm sure. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you all so much. If you do have more questions, I know Margo and I are both open to kind of having those conversations and supporting people to tell these stories in hopefully ways that are really effective. Our contact details are up on the slides. Please feel free to reach out, take a screenshot, drop us a note. With something that we're both passionate about. So we'd love to support you.
Thank you so much, everybody. It was good to meet you all. We appreciate your support.
Much appreciated. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.